If you haven't figured it out yet, this poor soul here is me in a 1997 high school production of Andrew Lloyd Webber's Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. And although it was a blast to be a part of, it was not a good show. I mean, there was nothing special about it. It was pretty much the standard performance you'd see at any middle or high school theater program. And I guess it has less to do with the director's style, but more so the material that they have to work with. You see, this was Webber and Tim Rice's very first collaboration at the tender young ages of 19 and 23 respectively, and, well, it shows. As a religious educator, it's fascinating to me that a story that involves deception, famine, false imprisonment, human trafficking, slavery, attempted fratricide, and accusations of rape can be presented as such G-rated cheese. From a queer perspective, the story of Joseph is frighteningly real. Because of that, today I'm calling for a Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat Revival to have a tone that matches that of scriptures and that will fully recognize Joseph as that gender non-conforming individual they probably were. Here's what that revival would look like. We begin with the prologue, as presented by what else? A transgendered woman, or a drag queen. After all, it is a queer perspective, so why not start it off on the right foot? We introduce Jacob and sons, culminating in Joseph, Jacob's favorite son. Joseph is described in Genesis 37 as a boy of 17 years old, who tends to the flocks with his brothers and referred to as a na'ar. Now, there are a few interpretations of this word, the first being a youth or lad. In the Midrash, the sages suggest that although Joseph was 17, he behaved like a boy, penciling his eyes, curling his hair, and lifting his heel. Calling Joseph a boy as opposed to a man is a way of feminizing him, while also questioning his emotional and social maturity. The second meaning of Na'ar is servant, suggesting what is really implied is that Joseph was a servant to his brothers, which again would make him a marginalized individual. I would definitely portray the brothers as rugged men of the soil, as much of a symbol of stereotypical masculinity as one can believably conceive. Joseph's father Jacob always put Joseph on a pedestal, and that may be because when Jacob was younger, it was he who was the gender nonconformist, always hanging out in the tents, which was the place known for women. He was known for liking to cook and was definitely a creative type, in contrast to his brother Esau, the firstborn of the family, who was the hunter, the dimwit, and described as being very hairy. So perhaps Jacob saw in Joseph a younger version of himself. Scripture also describes Joseph as handsome and good-looking. Jewish tradition adds that he's the image of his beautiful mother, fair of form and fair to look at. And Islamic tradition considered Joseph to be extraordinarily beautiful. Interesting descriptions for a man, considering physical appearance is rarely referenced in the Bible, unless it's pertinent to the story. Right after that Na'ar verse, the Torah tells us that Jacob loved Joseph more than all his children because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat with long sleeves. This coat, or Ketonet Passim in Hebrew, is often described as a coat of many colors, or in our own understanding as Joseph's Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. But scholars don't know how to interpret the word Passim. The only other time we find this word is in 2 Samuel, when King David's daughter Tamar was wearing a long robe with sleeves, for this is how the virgin daughters of the king were clothed in earlier times. So, Jacob bought Joseph a princess dress then? Nevertheless, once again, Joseph is set apart from his brothers. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Then Joseph immediately tells his brothers about a phallic dream he had where his sheaf of corn rose up and stood upright in the field, while their sheaves of corn gathered around it and bowed down to his. And the brothers hated him even more. Who wouldn't? Why would Joseph even tell them all this? Was he trying to elevate himself in response to the harassment, the bullying, the intimidation of his brothers? Even Jacob gets annoyed upon hearing about the second dream and scolded his son in front of the brothers, while keeping the matter in mind. Next, Joseph's brothers conspire to kill him. They strip him of his girlish robe and throw him into a pit. Transgender people are often bullied and demeaned, and in acts of mob violence, anatomical men are often castrated. By placing Joseph in a pit, the brothers are symbolically castrating him. Why do I say this? Because a pit is a hole. It's a feminine image. It's the opposite of an upright sheaf. One brother, Judah, realizing that there's no profit to be had by letting their brother starve to death, convinced the others to sell him into human trafficking as the Midianite traders pass by. They draw Joseph out of the pit and sell him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. They then tear his robe and rub it in the blood of a goat to take to their father to convince him that it was all just an animal attack. This whole sequence strangely resembles an arranged marriage, where a family is paid a dowry in exchange for their virgin daughter. But the marriage is not sealed until fully consummated, and blood is produced on a piece of cloth that is revealed to the father. In this scene, poor Joseph is merely a virgin bride that had just been sold into servitude. To drive the point home, chapter 38 of Genesis includes an entire story of Judah getting married and having multiple children, almost as if it's a reminder of what masculinity is supposed to look like. But this bizarre chapter also contains references to semen, conception, procreation, husbandly duty, and even prostitution. It is a sexually charged story that reinforces gender roles during the time of Joseph, but strangely does not show up anywhere in Andrew Lloyd Webber's production. Oh, and neither is the rape of Joseph's sister Dinah, and how her brothers avenged the perpetrators through forced circumcision and genocide. Yeah, maybe it was a blessing for Joseph to get away from that family. The family mourns Joseph's passing in One More Angel in Heaven, which I would stage as a graveside memorial being taunted by protesters a la the Westboro Baptist Church. And when Jacob exits the stage, the brothers and the protesters join together in their hateful celebration of this queer person's brutal death. Joseph is taken to Egypt and sold to Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials, where we are reminded that Joseph is attractive, handsome, and good-looking. It is often the plight of queer kids to move to a city as a sort of queer refugee, since urban areas tend to tolerate diversity more than small rural communities. It's also the case that many queer children are forced into prostitution to make ends meet. Jewish tradition suggests that all of these references to Joseph's good looks leads the reader to believe that Potiphar bought Joseph for himself to use sexually. Angered by the master's sexual abuse, the Talmud states that the angel Gabriel comes in and castrates Potiphar, and is known afterwards as Potipharah. This is one reason to speculate why Potiphar's wife is sexually frustrated and attempts to assault Joseph, who wants nothing to do with her advances. She falsely accuses him of rape, and the master places him in prison. Close Every Door is probably the best song in the entire production. It's the Technicolor Dreamcoat version of Webber's Gethsemane from his New Testament equivalent of Jesus Christ Superstar. But Joseph seemingly doesn't have much to despair, since even in prison, he is found favorable in the sight of the chief jailer. I wonder what that means. Go, Joseph. And no harm is done to him while he's in prison. While he's there, he demonstrates his ability to decipher the dreams of the Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and chief baker, with the former passing the message on to Pharaoh, and the latter being put to death. There are a few songs about Pharaoh having dreams, and Joseph is called to interpret them. I picture Pharaoh, who is traditionally presented as an Elvis impersonator, as a loud but not too bright, religiously conservative presidential figure surrounded by yes men who are equally bigoted, misogynistic, and white. Enter Joseph, the young queer that saves everyone by interpreting the dream as a predictor of agricultural abundance followed by famine. A David and Goliath story fulfilled. I love this message, particularly when you think about Egypt's famine as a consequence of climate change, with the politicians lacking the foresight to preserve resources during a time of abundance. Joseph's dreaming, creative ways are literally a godsend to this society. Something that society never would have reaped had they kept him locked away in prison. Or should I say the closet. Pharaoh provides a wife for Joseph and places him in command over Egypt's efforts to prepare for the famine. He's 30 years old at this time and fathers 2 children. As the Midrash says, when Joseph went forth to rule over Egypt, daughters of kings used to look at him through the lattices and throw bracelets, necklets, earrings, and finger rings to him, so that he might lift up his eyes and look at them. Yet he did not look at them. Although Joseph has a wife and children, he is portrayed as sexually chaste, or at least as a man with minimal interest in women. Michael Carden of the Queer Bible Commentary summarizes that Joseph epitomizes the faggot runaway who made good beyond his wildest dreams in the big city. Despite such success, there still remains the family to contend with, but now Joseph is in a position to confront his old pain. Those Canaan Days is a cute little number that shows the state of Joseph's family some 20 years later, starving and in need of assistance. The macho masculinity has given way to groveling, which in the following scene, they do so in front of Joseph, who they don't recognize, as he was given a new name, is much older, and is fully donned in Egyptian makeup and attire. And you know what happens next. Joseph toys with his brothers, holds Simeon captive and has him bound before their eyes, gets them to bring Benjamin and attempts to frame him. And the brothers grovel once more and atone for their past sins. I would definitely stage Benjamin's Calypso as a drag performance because it's got the energy, and I love the idea of these macho brothers being willing to embrace queer culture in order to save their brother's life. Yeah, I know the birdcage did it first, but whatever. It would certainly reflect how much these brothers have grown and what they're willing to do for family. Joseph reveals who he really is to his brothers, and his father is called to Egypt. This whole time, Jacob believed his son was dead, an assumption many parents of queer children make, or wish, after their children run away or are forced out of the home. But this is not the case with Jacob, who is beyond thrilled to see his son alive. But then something weird happens. Jacob takes Joseph's 2 sons away from him. Genesis 48 says, "Now then, your 2 sons born to you in Egypt before I came to you here will be reckoned as mine. Ephraim and Manasseh will be mine, just as Reuben and Simeon are mine." By then blessing the children, Jacob functions now as the father in the place of Joseph. Which, from a queer reader's perspective, this is just awful. The traditional patriarchy just stepped in and took the queer person's children away from him. Man, that's a crappy ending. Well, okay, maybe he never wanted to have the kids to begin with. His arranged marriage and children were just really the products of heteronormative assimilation, which many LGBT people do likewise in order to survive or to further their career or take political office. Remember when I talked about sexual potency? How sexual potency is a reflection of political power? Yeah, so maybe the childbearing was ordered by the Pharaoh to prove his status. That's it, right? And Jacob recognized that Joseph's marriage was forced and wanted to alleviate the burden from his son, therefore enabling him to be his truest self. So he took the kids. I'm okay with that. Anyways, Joseph was a reconciler and bridge builder within his own family and between the Hebrew nation and Egypt. Because of their experiences, many LGBT people often make great reconcilers and mediators. It's so hard not to read Joseph as a gender nonconforming person. Coat or dress, a dreamer, sensitive, bullied by his brothers, attractive, new name, unrecognizable, presumed dead by family members, and most significantly, having no interest in getting with any of the women who are literally throwing themselves on him. What I find most remarkable about this story is that it's a queer individual who is responsible for saving this world. Remember what I said about how the rainbow would forever be a sign of hope and love for God's people? Yeah, this story of a queer Joseph, is definitely proof of that.